Good morning. I don't know what you thought you were going to be doing when you woke up this morning, but I bet sign language wasn't on the list. That was awesome. Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Jerry, for teaching us that. My mom actually is an interpreter for the deaf, and I have watched her for years as she has interpreted for others, and have always been amazed at the expressiveness of that type of worship. So it was really neat to get to participate in that, and I appreciate you teaching us that. Grab a Bible if you have one. We're going to do one long set of scripture before we jump in, because I want to make sure, for some of us, this story will be old hat. We will know it well. But for some of us, this may be new. So we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 18. Some of you I know use the Bible app. We have a live event going on here. We want you to participate. If you prefer to do it digitally, start in 1 Kings 18, and then the little chunks of scripture as we jump on after this will show up on there as we go. Also, I wanted to let you know that for the first time, I think ever, we're live streaming our service. We do this for our shut-ins, for other people who might find us online. Don't worry, we're not like focused on you unless you were planning on sleeping. Then we are. Then we will see you. But other than that, the cameras are focused up here. But we wanted this to be a ministry to those of our body who cannot always join us, whether they're out of town or maybe they're not able to get out of the house. We wanted for them to be able to participate as well. So, 1 Kings chapter 18. We're going to start in verse 16 and read one of the cooler stories in the Bible. So Obadiah, a man faithful to God, went to tell Ahab, a king who was not faithful, that Elijah, the prophet of God, had come. And Ahab went out to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw him, he exclaimed, "So, is it really you, you troublemaker of Israel?" "I've made no trouble for Israel," Elijah replied. "You and your family are the troublemakers. For you have refused to obey the commands of the Lord and have worshipped the images of Baal instead. Now, summon all Israel to join me at Mount Carmel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah, who were supported by Jezebel, Ahab's wife." So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Then Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." But the people were completely silent. Then Elijah said to them, "I'm the only prophet of the Lord who is left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Now, bring 2 bulls. The prophets of Baal may choose whichever one they wish and cut it into pieces and lay it on the wood of their altar, but without setting fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and lay it on the wood on the altar, but not set fire to it. Then call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by setting fire to the wood is the true God." And all the people agreed. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "You go first, for there are many of you. Choose one of the bulls and prepare it, and call on the name of your God, but do not set fire to the wood." So they prepared one of the bulls and placed it on the altar. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning until noontime, shouting, "O Baal, answer us!" But there was no reply of any kind. Then they danced, hobbling around the altar they had made. About noontime, Elijah began to mock them. "You'll have to shout louder," he scoffed, "for surely he is a god. Perhaps he's daydreaming or relieving himself. Or maybe he's away on a trip, or he's sleeping and needs to be wakened." So they shouted louder, and following their normal customs, they cut themselves with knives and swords until the blood gushed out. They raved all afternoon until the time of the evening sacrifice. But still, there was no sound, no reply, no response. Then Elijah called to the people, "Come over here." And they all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Then he dug a trench around the altar large enough to hold about 3 gallons. He placed wood on the altar, cut the bull into pieces, and laid the pieces on the wood. Then he said, "Fill 4 large jugs with water and pour the water over the offering and the wood." After they had done this, he said, "Do the same thing again." And when they had finished, he said, "Now do it a 3rd time." So they did as he said, and the water ran around the altar and even filled the trench. At the usual time for the evening sacrifice, Elijah the prophet walked up to the altar and prayed, "O Lord, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, prove today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant. Prove that I have done all this at your command. O Lord, answer me. Answer me so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God and that you have brought them back to yourself." Immediately, the fire of the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, "The Lord, He is God! Yes, the Lord is God!" Then Elijah commanded, "Seize all the prophets of Baal. Don't let a single one escape." So the people seized them all. And Elijah took them down to the Kishon Valley and killed them there. Now, I love this story. Like, with the feeding of the 5,000 in the New Testament, this has got to be one of my 2 or 3 favorite stories in all the Bible. I think this story is so cool because it's just epic. Like, I grew up on Westerns, and this is high noon at the OK Corral. This is good versus evil. This is right versus wrong. This is let's meet, and you can just hear the whistle. Wah, 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 right? It's Elijah versus 850 prophets. It's 850 to 1. And it's the underdog versus the overwhelming odds. And he challenges the prophets of Baal. And he makes a wager. And at the end of all of this, good conquers evil. God conquers the idols. The good guy wins. Now, I love this story, but I have wrestled all week with how I help you set up the drama here. How do I help you understand the emotion that goes into this moment? How do I help you understand the 3 years that had gone by with no rain because God has withheld it at Elijah's request? How do I help you understand the apostasy of Ahab and Jezebel, who were supposed to be faithful king and queen, but who have turned to serve other gods? How do I help you understand the frustration of the prophet who has asked the people to make a choice and they can't? How do I help you understand the victory? How do I help you feel what they felt? And then I remembered something. So last year, we bought our kids a game. You can put that up there, David. I was going to try to control it from here, but it's not reaching. This game is called Pie Face Showdown. And the way it works is there's 2 little chin rests, and you put your chin on one of these rests, and then there's 2 little red buttons, and there's a hand in the middle that you put whipped cream all over. And then when you say go, you start to tap the buttons, and the little arm will move back and forth, and whoever presses it faster, it goes the other way, and it will smash the other person with the pie in the face. So last year, we got this present for our kids, and we had them open it at Grandpa and Benna's house. And they went, "Oh, Pie Face Showdown, we saw this on YouTube, we can't wait to play." And I said, "We definitely should play right now against your grandpa," who is here today and who did not know I was going to be sharing this story. And so he gave me this look like some of you may have given your kids from time to time. He didn't look thrilled, but he put on a good face for the grandkids, and he said, "Sure, let's play." And he went up against Kai, my oldest son, first. And there was this a little bit of nervousness in my dad, knowing there was a good shot that he was going to get pied in the face. And they sat down, and my mom said, "On your mark, get set, go." And they began to tap furiously on the little red buttons, and it moved back and forth, but at the end, my dad overcame, and it went, and boom, it pied Kai right in the face. And so then Ashlyn, our daughter, said, "I'm next." Grandpa rolls his eyes, "Okay, fine." And he sits down, and we're on your mark, get set, go, and they start pressing the button again, and it goes back and forth, and it really looks like it's going to get my dad, but then it swings back around, and boom, it gets Ashlyn in the face. Well, now he's starting to get confident, because he's gone through the 2 oldest. And so Abel, the oldest twin, by a whopping 6 minutes, claims his right as the next oldest to go against Grandpa. And so he sits down, and now my dad, who is facing a 4-year-old, is feeling pretty good about himself. And we load it up with pie. On your mark, get set, go, and they begin to press furiously, and it's not even a challenge. Just swings over and pies Abel in the face. Not a look of guilt or remorse at what is happening. He is now all swagger. And now comes Roman, the younger of the twins. And he sits down, and you can see on Roman's face, he is completely ready to get pied. In fact, he thinks it'll be hilarious to get pied. And so he sits down in the chair, and fortunately, the cameras were rolling. Let's play that video, Rich.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right, go.
Vegas and asked about the betting market, it would have been just like this when my dad versus Roman. He has never lost a match, the uncontested heavyweight champion. And they go head to head and they begin to push. Now, halfway through, this is the face that happens. Maybe you can't see that. Go to the next slide. That's the face. This is the moment where he realizes, oh no, things are not going the way I expected them to. This is the moment when Elijah starts to rebuild the altar of God. When the prophets of Baal start to question the equation they had locked down in their minds, and they realize maybe we anticipated the outcome wrong. And then fire rains down from heaven, and this final moment, go ahead, Dave. This final moment, look at the veins in Roman's neck. They're standing out. And I love this. I love this image because number one, it's hilarious, but it's this, he wasn't even like, he's not celebrating. This is just like pure victorious, like warrior scream. That's my boy, right? He is overcome. Good versus evil. Underdog versus overwhelming odds, and he has won. This is the emotion that gets built in here, where you can see everything is building, and then the good guy wins. I love this story. I love that good conquers evil, that God conquers false gods. But as much as I love it, I'm not really sure how to relate to it. I mean, what about you? Like, where do we fit in this story? When we read a story, one of the things that makes reading so enjoyable is we very quickly start to tie ourselves into one of the characters, right? Well, where do I fit here? I hope it's not the prophets of Baal, right? That's not where I want to fit. The prophet of a false god, the people who are going against God. I don't want to be in that camp, so I don't really relate to them. But Elijah? I don't really know that I resonate with him either. I mean, believe it or not, God has never asked me to call down fire from heaven. That would be pretty awesome if he did, right? Did you guys see that pillar of fire over downtown Bartlesville? Oh, Aaron's leading somebody to Jesus, right? Like, that would be pretty amazing, but I've never had the opportunity. So I don't really relate to this guy against overwhelming odds, hearing the call of God and being faithful all by himself. So where do I relate? If I'm not the evil prophets of Baal and I'm not Elijah, then maybe, if I'm being honest, the place that I find myself most comfortable in this story is in the sandals of the Israelites. Look at this verse from the beginning of the story. So Ahab summoned all the people of Israel and the prophets to Mount Carmel. Now, when it says all the people, you can imagine, I'll show you a picture in 2 weeks of what Mount Carmel looks like. But it's a long plateau, and it's about 1,700 feet high. And so you can imagine that thousands of people could fit on this mountain. And this is a spectacle, right? It's high noon. People will come from miles around to witness this. So there are a lot of people on top of this mountain. And Elijah stood in front of them and said, "How much longer will you waver, hobbling between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." And look at their response. On the next slide. But the people were completely silent. Now, by the end of the story, on Mount Carmel, the people will have made a choice, right? There will be this victorious moment. But at the beginning of this story, the people are frozen. They are asked to make a choice, and they are stuck. They cannot choose. But this is God's people, right? These are the Israelites. When you say, who are you going to follow, Yahweh or someone else, the answer is supposed to be easy. And yet when Elijah asked them, the people are stuck. And so I spent this week asking myself, what makes good people get stuck? I mean, this is one of those places where I would like to say, you dumb Israelites. How could you make that decision? Think of all that God has done for you. But if I'm honest, I think they relate pretty well. See, the people are stuck, I think, not because they want to choose Baal over Yahweh. In fact, the problem is for them, not that they are choosing to follow an idol instead of God. For them, they're stuck because they don't want to choose at all. The people here are very happy to follow whoever is in control. And they've got some pretty strong voices pulling them in the direction of Baal. For instance, others are doing it. All of their friends in Israel, all of their community have now bowed down to the idol of Baal and to Asherah, who often went together. They have all bowed the knee. They have all worshiped at these idols. So the community is doing it. My friends are doing it. And not just that, but my leaders are doing it. The king and queen, the people in charge, they tell me that Baal and Asherah are the gods to follow. And so if they are in charge and they are successful, then I should do what they do. I want to be like them. So my community is telling me to worship these idols, and my leaders are telling me to worship these idols. And honestly, worshiping these idols, if I'm an Israelite, well, maybe it makes me happy. Because Baal and Asherah, they're fertility gods and goddesses. When I worship them, the rain comes on the crops, and maybe the crops produce a little bit more. And when I worship them, my wife, she gets pregnant and our babies are healthier. That's what I believe in. And it makes us have more children. So by worshiping these idols that my friends are worshiping and my leaders are worshiping, then when I worship them, maybe it also might just help my land and my family be more fertile and produce a little bit better. It makes me happy if I'm an Israelite to worship them. It's not that I'm not willing to worship Yahweh, but the problem is Elijah shows up and says, make a choice, and they say, can't we have it all? We've actually found in the archaeological record in Israel places where the altar of Yahweh is right next to the altar of Baal and the Asherah pole, where these places have been buried together because it was so common for people to want to have it all and to worship not just the God of Israel, but all the gods from the people around them. It's not that the people won't choose God, it's that they want to choose God and something else. Maybe the problem for the people on Carmel wasn't they didn't want to choose God, they just didn't want to choose only God. And maybe Satan doesn't care if you worship God as long as you worship other things too. Maybe, let's put this up there, Dave, maybe for God's people, Satan is less concerned with getting us to choose wrong than he is just from keeping us from choosing at all. Maybe one of the great lies Satan has told us is that we can have it all. I get asked fairly often by teenagers and from adults too, why am I not growing in my faith? Why do I feel so stuck? I feel like I'm checking the right boxes, I'm doing the right things, I'm going through the right motions, but I don't feel like I'm becoming any more like Jesus. I don't feel like my faith has gotten any more rich or any deeper. I don't feel my life changing. And so these teenagers, these adults will come to me and say, Aaron, why am I stuck right here? And often the answer for the teens, for the adults, for myself, is that just like for the Israelites on Mount Carmel, they aren't choosing. They've gotten stuck. They've bought into the lie that they can have it both ways. They aren't pursuing Jesus. They're pursuing Jesus and. Now, I want to help you understand Jesus and this morning because I think this is where the rubber starts to really meet the road and where maybe, I know at least for me, it connects in my heart. So I asked a couple, Ed, if you'll come up here, and David, if you'll come up here and join me this morning. I asked Corey if Ed was going to be able to make it this morning. She said yes. She said, do you want him to volunteer? And I said, yeah. And he said, now remember, he's bigger than you. Which is part of the reason I chose him. David, if you'll stand over here, and Ed, if you'll just kind of come front and center. Now, I want to help you illustrate and understand Jesus and, okay? So for the sake of this illustration, David, you get to be Jesus. Could you look a little more Jesus-y? Knockout job, just fantastic. Okay, so David's going to be Jesus, and Ed, you're going to be Ed. And if you would, just follow Jesus. Just as a Jesus follower, you're supposed to do what? Follow Jesus. So just follow Jesus. Pretty easy, right? If this is all there was to life, we'd all be in great shape. You wouldn't need to come here. Ed, if you would, come back over here. The problem is that following Jesus is never really the equation we're looking at, where it's just me and him, and it's just this easy to follow. Levi, where you at? Join me up here for a second. See, what happens for every single one of us is that we may want to follow Jesus, those of us who have put on Christ in baptism or who have taken those steps and figured out what it means to follow. We really want to follow Jesus, but we don't want to just follow Jesus. And so we start to get these Jesus and. What'd you bring up here with you? Success. Jesus and success. Now to represent success, Levi. I know how much is in there. I expect to get it back. Wait, you work for Edward Jones. I expect it back with interest. All right. Now, what I want you to do, Levi, you go ahead, Ed, you guys just like hold wrists for me. No, don't give him the money. You hold on to that money. All right, good. So, Ed, what I want you to do is just walk over to Jesus now, and Levi, just drag him a little bit. Okay, good. Now, a little bit harder. Could you make it? You could, sure. But it is harder now, right? With a little bit, yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, I can do this, right? Okay, good. You continue, stay attached. But if it were just maybe success that was calling our name, maybe that would be enough. But there's always more, right? What about family? Where's the family at? Come on, Corey, the rest of you, family, y'all come on. Jacob, Mackenzie, Caitlin, where are you at? Y'all come, Addison, where are you? Y'all come up here. Come join me on stage real quick. I didn't tell them they were going to do this. Corey volunteered all of them. Great. So I'll tell you what, you guys just like give Ed a big hug. Like y'all just kind of group family hug. Good. Yeah, nice. Family up, drape family on his neck, and you guys just, now y'all are going to kind of hold him tight, right? I'm not going to have you go ahead because I don't want you to trample them. But it's not just success, and it's not just family that we get drawn to, right? We want to believe when we follow Jesus, we're also drawn to other things. Maybe, well, if I got the money and I got the family, well, I got to make sure we're safe and we're comfortable. Valen, would you join me up here? I wanted to get you a more comfortable chair. Come on, yeah, grab that chair. This was the only one I could get in here easily. So I'm going to have you just sit right over here in that chair. Yeah, well, hang this on Ed. And if you'll just grab onto Levi's arm real tight. Now, Ed, if you start to walk towards Jesus now, how's that going to go for you? Right, eventually you're going to get to a point where you start to trip up. It starts to get a little bit difficult. And this is just the good stuff. Kai, come here for a second. We're not even talking about sin yet. A little sin. You just grab on there to, grab Ed around his ankles, would you? Yeah, like put your arms right, like you're dragging on his feet. There you go, just grab onto that leg there, good. Are any of these things, besides the little sin, are any of these things bad? Success, is it bad? I know this is church, but this is an easy answer. Is success bad? No. Is family bad? No. Is comfort or safety in and of itself a bad thing to want? It's not. None of these things are inherently evil. The problem is not that these things are in our lives. The problem is that Satan doesn't want you to choose just Jesus. He says you're going to have it all. Your pursuit is going to be tugged in all these different directions until it gets to this point. Y'all hold tight. Hold tight. Hold tight. Don't get trampled. All right. Where if Ed wants to move towards Jesus, what's going to happen? Is he ever going to overcome this? And it's not that these things are bad. It's just that they have equal weight and now perhaps more weight in his heart and in his life than the call to be Jesus' disciple. Are you with me? This is the challenge for the people on Mount Carmel. It's not that they don't want to follow Yahweh, that they don't want to follow God. It's that they want to follow him and everything else. You two stay up here. Let's say thank you to the rest of these guys. Thank you all for helping. Now, thank you. The challenge here is that we get stuck. And so what do we do when at the end of the day, we're left with all these other things calling our attention away from Jesus? What do we learn from the Israelites on Carmel about how we find a way to shed these other desires and pursue Jesus with the kind of focus that he demands? Look at what Jesus says in Luke chapter 9. Let's put this up on the screen. As they were walking along, someone said to Jesus, "I'll follow you wherever you go." But Jesus replied, "Foxes have dens to live in and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to even lay his head." Next. He said to another person, "You, come, follow me." And the man agreed. But he said, "Lord, first let me return home and bury my father." But Jesus told him, "Let the dead bury their own dead. Your duty is to go and preach about the kingdom of God." Another said, "Yes, Lord, I will follow you. But first, let me go say goodbye to my family." But Jesus told him, "Anyone who puts a hand to the plow and then looks back is not fit for the kingdom of God." Jesus routinely turns would-be disciples away, not because what they've got in their life is wrong, but because what they've got in their life is a distraction they are not willing to overcome. They are not willing to get rid of. So how do we break free of this cycle where Jesus is there and we know we're called to follow, but all of these other things have our attention too? How do we finally let go of the "and" that we so often put after Jesus? Here's what we learn, I think, from the passage on Mount Carmel. Go ahead and put that first one up. Look what he says. Elijah called the people, "Come around here." They all crowded around him as he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been torn down. Now, why does he do this? Go to the next one. He took 12 stones, one to represent each of the tribes of Israel, and he used the stones to rebuild the altar in the name of the Lord. Why does Elijah do this? The number is not an accident. Elijah grabs 12 stones and builds an altar. Why? Because there are 12 tribes of Israel. Why are there stones? Well, if they start to think back, they go, my parents told me this story of a time when God came down on a mountain and we stacked 12 stones to remind us of that. And I remember this time when my grandparents said they crossed the Jordan River, they stepped in, the waters parted, and then when they got done, they grabbed 12 big river stones and piled them up. Why does he build an altar out of 12 stones? Because if it were not for the story of God, there would not be 12 tribes. He is reminding them of their identity and their story. Go to the next slide. Here's how you get unstuck. When you're at a place where you say, my faith is not growing, my discipleship is not growing, the people on Mount Carmel remind us, first of all, remember your story. Is this who you wanted to be when you put on Christ in baptism? Is this who you were called to be when your parents or your grandparents or your friend told you about Jesus Christ and you said, I want to follow him? Is this the person you were called to be? How has God worked in your life? Because when we get stuck, when we start to say Jesus and all this other stuff, it's typically because we've forgotten the story that God has been working in our lives. And we've begun to believe that these other things will tell a more fulfilling story. So the first thing you got to do to get unstuck is to remember your story. Go to the next slide. And then at the end of the story, it says, immediately after he prayed, the fire from the Lord flashed down from heaven and burned up the young bull, the wood, the stones, and the dust. It even licked up all the water in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell face down on the ground and cried out, the Lord, he is God. Yahweh is God. Duh. This is kind of a lame time to be moving forward, right? After the fire has come down. After the miracle has happened. Now you're willing to profess your faith? It seems lame to us, but look, not what the people have done here. Look what God has done. Go ahead and put that next slide up there. To get unstuck, we got to seek the power and the grace of God. Because it turns out that no matter how hard Ed wants to not want this stuff, there is no way in the world he will ever overcome its draw. Right? It's true for me. Oh, Aaron, you're preaching today. You don't mean that. Absolutely I do. And for every single one of us in here, I can guarantee you that this draw is always more than we can overcome on our own. But Elijah and the Israelites don't have to figure out how to follow Yahweh by themselves on their own. Instead, God comes in a pillar of fire and he shows two things. His power, obviously, but his grace. You know why the people shout, God is Lord? Because they're able to. And the only reason they're able to is when God sent the fire down and he licked up the wood and the stones and the water, he didn't just go ahead and lick up all the people too. That's what they deserved. But instead, he shows them mercy and grace because he's not done with them. It turns out that you and I never have enough power to remove these desires and these sins from our lives and from our hearts. It takes someone else. And so Jesus came. And Jesus, in an answer to our sin, removes these other things and says, if you will follow me, I will take these other things on. And it might just turn out that I will lead you back around and you will end up finding more than you ever bargained for. David said, I don't know if I can reach those signs. And so instead of it being Ed's job to fix Ed's problem, God takes it upon himself. Here's the really cool thing, and I want you to keep this in mind as we wrap up. On Mount Sinai, God comes to speak to the people, and he comes from the heavens in a pillar of what? Fire. In the wilderness, as they wander, God leads them during the day as cloud and night as a pillar of fire. And then on Mount Carmel, when there's a sacrifice ready to be made, God comes and leads his people in a pillar of. And then in Acts chapter 2, after Jesus has died and paid the sacrifice for our sin, after he's rose from the dead through the power of God, after he's ascended to heaven, his people are waiting in Jerusalem for him, and God comes down in tongues of what? Fire. God shows back up to lead his people. And the good news is, for every single one of us who put on Jesus Christ in baptism, we have the gift of the Holy Spirit. It is no longer by our power that this happens. It is all by the power and the grace of God. Are you with me? Let's thank these volunteers. Thank you, guys. This morning, as every other morning, we have a choice to make. There is not a day where the choice doesn't get asked, who will you follow today? God or all the other stuff that the world would love to add into your pursuit? That doesn't mean we don't go to work. It just means that when we go to work, we're working following Jesus and letting Him lead us through our day. It doesn't mean that we don't seek that family. It just means that when we interact with our family, we follow Christ first and let Him lead us in every interaction. It doesn't mean that we don't participate in or commune with or be a part of the world. It just means that when we walk through our lives, it is not a question of what else can I get to bring along with Jesus. We follow Jesus and we trust that wherever He leads us will be better. This morning we have a choice. What do you choose? And for most of us, we chose God a long time ago. The problem is when we do a little self-reflection, we go, oh, I got a lot of baggage I didn't realize I've been carrying around. And so every day, it is a chance and a choice to say, God, I realize that I've had and attached to a lot of things behind Jesus. But what we seek is His power and His grace to help us move where we couldn't go on our own power, and to trust that He loves us enough that He's not going to shame us and blame us and make us feel bad for all the stuff we've been dragging along, but instead that His power is the thing that can move us forward. I don't know what needs you have this morning. I don't know where you are in this process and in this journey. But if there's a way we can pray for you, if there's a way we can help you find that next step, we would love to be a part of the next steps in your journey. Now is a great time to respond. Our shepherds go to the back every week because they want to pray with you. And then one of them comes forward, we'll stand up here, and if you want to come make a need known to us up front, you can do that too. Let's stand and let's sing together as we offer this invitation.